Two types of stress. The one is hyper-alert stress, almost all familiar with, because when we hear stress, we think pupils dilating, hands shaking, heart beating, oh my goodness, or really upset, you're stuck in traffic, something is really bothering you, you're angry, you're having the fight or flight response, which is you're too activated, you're too alert, you're too agitated, and you want to be less alert, less activated, and less agitated. There's another side of stress, which is over-fatigue stress. When there are a lot of things happening in the world, pandemics, you can't work, there's another shutdown, there's strife in your life, or things are really challenging and you're feeling exhausted and you can't get mobilized and alert enough. And what I call the whole process is one of limbic friction. Okay, so the limbic system are these areas deep in the brain. Limbic literally means edge, they're near the edge of the brain. When we're stressed, there's a lot of activity in these brain regions. And then we got our forebrain, our prefrontal cortex for the aficionados. And when we're in a thinking and calm and deliberate and rational manner, when we can control our body and our mind, it's called top-down processing. We're controlling ourselves. But there's a lot of friction with that limbic pathway. There's this friction, we can call it limbic friction. You can't control all those impulses and all that anxiety or fatigue for too long. And in fact, as you get more tired, or if someone has frontal damage, if they have brain damage to the frontal lobes, what you find is they become more impulsive and they feel like sleeping, they just sleep, even if it's socially inappropriate. When they feel like yelling or screaming or swearing, they just do that. And so there's two kinds of limbic friction. One is when we're too activated and want to calm down and we're trying to say, okay, calm down. And then there's the other kind of limbic friction, which is the world is happening really fast and we feel buried, we're overwhelmed, and we need to get more activated. We need more energy. We need to be able to lean into life and we're feeling overwhelmed. What happens is people are so overactivated, they're in this alertness, hyper-alert stress for so long that eventually they kind of crash into the over-fatigue stress. The first thing for anyone trying to navigate stress is to understand what kind of stress they're dealing with. Are you exhausted and having a hard time getting your energy up? Or is your energy too high and you're having a hard time getting your energy down? Because the solutions to those are often quite different. They should look to the body in the sense that all the panels and all the controls are there. Most people are taught how to drive a car. Most people are not taught how to drive their nervous system. And so a lot of what I'm talking about here is just one language, one version of the language of how to drive and control your nervous system. The nervous system includes the brain, but also all the connections to the body and back again. And so when you can't control your mind, you want to do something purely mechanical. Because, once you take control of the body in that way, then the mind starts to fall under the umbrella of this top-down control again. Rather than trying to take control of your thinking, which is very hard. Trying to control the mind with the mind is like trying to grab fog. It's vapors, you're never going to grab it. When we are in hyper-alert, there's a mechanism associated with that makes our internal world measure time differently. What happens under those conditions is you feel like the external world is moving very slowly. When you're really stressed on the hyper-alert side, it seems like the world is going very slowly. You're going to, just knowing that and knowing that it's likely that you're going to feel impatient and if the world is moving much too slow. Key is to take control of the system by taking control of a real physical entity like the physiological sigh.
Physiological size, in my understanding and from what I've seen, it's still preliminary, but seems to be the fastest way to adjust your stress level down. And you can do this while walking down the hall.
There's a nerve called the phrenic nerve, P-H-R-E-N-I-C, that goes from the brain down to the diaphragm that controls that and then controls the lungs. So when you decide, okay, I'm going to use the sigh, the physiological sigh, to calm myself, in a way you're engaging top-down control because you're taking control of your internal landscape. The reason I like the physiological sigh is we are all equipped with the pathway.
Discovered in the 30s, which are a spontaneous pattern of breathing that people and animals do where they inhale twice and then exhale longer. So it's inhale.
So you'll notice I breathed in and then I snuck in a little bit more air on a second inhale and then I gave a long exhale.
So it's double inhale followed by an exhale. Typically the inhales are through the nose and the exhales through the mouth, although not always. We do that spontaneously during sleep. We do it under conditions of claustrophobia when carbon dioxide in the bloodstream gets too high.
I think when people realize this isn't something that you build up over time and then are able to do, that you literally have a set of wires that goes down to your diaphragm, this muscle in your abdomen that can move your lungs. And then as you blow off carbon dioxide, when you do that exhale, your brain starts to calm down, and then your mind, the top-down control of the cortex, can start taking control of the limbic system again. It's almost like you're losing control of the automobile and you're trying to steer, but really there's another lever that if you just pull it, then the steering wheel will stabilize for you. So that's the way to think about the physiological side. On the other side of things, when you're feeling overwhelmed and fatigued, there are two ways to approach that. First is the kind of foundation of fatigue, which is almost always poor sleep and scheduling of sleep. Getting better at sleeping is a whole set of practices. But sleep is a slow tool. It's not a real-time tool, because if you're feeling exhausted and you have to get up and have your day, deal with children, deal with work, deal with life, in real time, what you want to do is you want to bring more alertness into the system. The way to do that is to take advantage of a very well-established medical fact, which is that there's a direct relationship between how you breathe and your heart rate. When we inhale, it almost feels like everything's moving up, but actually what happens is our diaphragm moves down. Okay, so when we inhale, our diaphragm moves down. When that happens, our heart literally gets a little bit bigger. The volume of the heart gets a little bit bigger, which means that whatever blood in there is moving per unit time a little bit slower. And there's a set of neurons in the heart called the sinoatrial node that sends a signal to the brain and says, hey, blood flow is slowing down. And the brain sends a signal back to the heart and says, okay, let's speed up, and speeds up the heart rate. So the short, concise way to put it is when you inhale more vigorously or longer, you're speeding up your heart rate. As you inhale, you're sending a neural signal to your heart to speed up. And when you exhale, the diaphragm moves up. The heart gets a little bit smaller, literally because there's less space there. Then there's a signal sent to the brain, and the brain sends a signal back and says, slow down the heart rate. Longer or more vigorous inhales will speed up your heart rate and make you more alert. Longer or more vigorous exhales will slow down your heart rate and make you less alert, which is, it's a certain kind of arrhythmia, but that makes it sound bad. This is actually what's happening all the time. This is the basis of heart rate variability. When people talk about heart rate variability is good, you don't want your heart rate to be one level all day, high or low. A lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, I got a nice slow heart rate. Well, slow heart rate is better than excessively high heart rate, but you don't want your heart rate to be like this. You want your heart rate to go through these fluctuations. Heart rate variability is good because heart rate variability reflects the activation of what's typically called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brain's ability to slow down and calm the nervous system. So when your heart rate is going like this, it means that your heart rate is speeding up and then your brain is slowing it down. Your heart rate is speeding it up and your brain is slowing it down. And that's what's happening all day long as you're moving through things in a kind of calm, alert way. But when you get that troubling text message, or you see a post or a comment, and all of a sudden your heart rate just goes, and you feel like you immediately want to respond, or you're going to say the thing that maybe you shouldn't say, or you're going to do the thing that maybe you shouldn't do, or you just want to be more thoughtful and more targeted in your response, the key is to slow down the heart rate by making your exhales longer or more vigorous. So it could simply be, and then shorter inhales, longer exhales, or do the physiological side. Or if you wake up in the morning and you're experiencing the other kind of stress, which is the world is overwhelming me. My life is overwhelming. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know what sequence I'm going to do things in. You're just discombobulated. And a lot of people struggle with this. The key is to do few breaths, even while you're getting out of bed and preparing your morning coffee or water or whatever it is, and just start breathing in a way that's inhale emphasized. Which sounds weird, but basically what you're doing is you're speeding up your heart rate. At some point, usually within only 2 or 3 of those breaths, you're going to feel more alert, and then you can just go back to breathing normally. And while I'm a fan of breath work as its own thing, because breath work can teach you how to operate these levers in your brain and body, breath work is a dedicated practice that you do away from these stressful events. Learning to control your heart rate and thereby your mind using your breathing. So it goes breathing, heart rate, mind. So if your mind isn't where you want it to be, don't start with the mind. Start with your breathing, then which will control your heart rate, which will then allow you to control your mind. I think it's very important, just to kind of summarize, that people understand to just ask themselves the question, am I feeling too much agitation or am I feeling too much exhaustion? If it's too much agitation, emphasize exhales and do the physiological sigh. You'll notice your heart rate will pick up because there's a neural signal from the brainstem sent to the heart to speed up the amount of blood flow. These breathing practices are about shifting the gears, but they're not something that you continue doing throughout your day.
Yeah.
Really what I've described here are hardwired, meaning we were all born with these neurons and connections in our body. We were all born with these organs to be able to do these things. There's not a lot of learning involved. Once you know how to do it, it works the first time, it works every time.